All right, folks, it's time for World Politics. We're going to be talking about a number of things happening on the political landscape, particularly around the world and in various parts of the world, because we know that the political landscape is constantly changing, whether it's what's going on in France, whether it's what's going on in the African continent, or whether it's what's going on in Georgia. And I don't mean Georgia here in the United States, but Georgia that's in Eastern Europe. And actually, earlier, as we were starting the show, we were talking to Sasha Starr about the state of the war in Ukraine and Russia and all along those lines. And we do know that a lot of people are paying attention to that conflict and what's happening in that conflict, even trying to figure out if President-elect Trump will be able to end the war in a timely fashion, the way that he has said that he wants to do, and even as he was campaigning that he would do, and all along those lines. So, Sasha, there's a lot of speculation as to whether there will be a peace treaty in the end of the year, or definitely by the beginning of 2025, and all along those lines. And if there is a peace treaty, whether that will end the conflict or whether it'll just put it in a stalemate. So, what is your take on the Trump presidency and its impact on both the war in Ukraine, as well as what's going on in the Middle East, which seems to be an expanding conflict? So how do you think President Trump will handle these international situations?
Okay, I think we have to start to really analyze and to wait what is really happening on the ground in Russia-Ukrainian war. Right now, it seems to me that Russia got stuck. They put enormous forces, including weapons of all kinds. They invited 10 to 12,000 Korean troops, and they cannot really make much progress. Okay, they're making sometimes 100 meters, 200 meters a day, losing 1,500 to 2,000 people. They're doing so-called how should I say it correctly? Meat attacks. What means meat attacks? They have, for example, let's see, 100 soldiers who are going ahead to attack Ukrainian positions. Ukrainians dig in, and they have all the necessary ammunition to kill this 100 people in a matter of 5 minutes, 6 maybe. But guess what? 40 minutes later, the same attack from the same place to the same place, happening again, same 100 people, not the same quite, but still 100 Russian people. Soldiers are attacking Ukrainian position. Ukrainians are killing them in next 5 to 6 minutes. Guess what? Same thing happens in 40 minutes, and it goes on over and over again all day long. That's what's happened in Ukraine right now. How do you see that the both sides who have absolutely opposite view of what's happening there can be somehow reconciled and brought to the table? I don't see that happening at all, period. It's just not happening unless Ukraine will get all kind of weapons, ammunition, and will be armed to teeth, that they will be begging Europe and United States, stop sending your weapons. We don't have places to store them. And they will hit the Russian army the big way, the biggest way possible. And that only can bring Putin to the table. and listen to General Kellogg proposal and some other people's proposal, and Brazil-China proposal, and Hungarian proposal, there is one, and many, many other proposals. But he had to brought to the point to listen to any proposal, because today his position is, I'm winning the war. Ukraine is no longer a country. It's going to be destroyed, and that's what's going to happen. And I don't need any plans for negotiations or anything like that. How you can negotiate with the people in this situation? Please tell me.
It'll be interesting to see. Maybe Rick's got some thoughts. I know that there was a talk that if Putin went to different places, he might get arrested and everything. And I saw that there's the first EU visit for a Russian foreign minister since the invasion. And so Sergio Lavrov is in Malta for a 2-day summit of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. So is there any possibility that Sergei Lavrov might get arrested as he's in Malta, as he is the Russian foreign minister, and it's the first EU visit since the invasion took place almost a year and a half ago, and all along those
I don't
lines?
think that's a thing they do. I don't know what it would accomplish diplomatically, and I just don't think in the past, since World War II, who's been arrested for doing stuff like this.
Like I said, and I don't know that they'll do this. By the way, there's always been conversations, even on this network, about whether the far right is doing well or whether the far left is doing well. And apparently, Romania's far right presidential frontrunner has vowed to end Ukrainian aid. So, Călin Gorgeson, who leads Romania's presidential race, tells the BBC he would end support for Ukraine if elected. So is this going to impact the war, some of these smaller countries that may wind up pulling out their support and all along those lines? Or is it a much ado about nothing, in the words of theater, and all along those lines? So will it matter if Romania pulls out its aid?
Well, Russia is messing with the Romanian election. So, yeah, you're going to get some people who are in the pocket of Russia saying stuff. But Romania is not a huge country. Let's see.
Yeah, well, you come up with a very good question.
They've got 19 million people. That's half the population of Ukraine. It's less than 1/8 the population of Russia. It's so... But they're very close to Russia, and they're getting messed with by Russia.
Yeah, definitely getting messed. Yeah, definitely getting messed by Russia, and all along those lines. By the way, there's other stories in other parts of the globe, and all along those lines, Emmanuel Macron is vowing to name a new French prime minister within days after he rejected calls to resign, and a day after his prime minister was ousted in a no confidence vote. And even in Italy, which I don't think is far from you where you're now living, Nick, the Italian police have arrested a nun of all people, because apparently the nun had links to the mafia. So the sister, a volunteer in a prison, is accused of ferrying messages to convicted non-Drangheta members. So apparently she was being used as a courier for the mafia, and all along those lines. So definitely, who knows, you might even get caught up into being a courier for folks as you are over there in the that area, not that far, because Italy and Spain are fairly close together and everything. So what's your thoughts around that part of the international world community?
Well, I actually haven't heard of that story. There's a big story, obviously, here about the problem we're having in France right now, and the collapse of the government over there. Yes. So that's in headlines. Oddly enough, though, the Ukraine war is hardly even mentioned here, which is interesting, because the EU obviously supports Ukraine, but in terms of getting day-to-day reports on what's going on in Ukraine, I have to listen to Sasha's.
And he'll be having
Sasha on Pod TV, Ukraine, Russia, China.
And they'll have a great discussion on tomorrow. They'll be talking a lot about that. I know Jonathan Lockwood will be there. I think Ivan, who actually gives some great videos from the situation, is what's going on, and he does those on a regular basis. Not always on Friday, but he's always there, usually on Tuesday and everything. But maybe they'll be there tomorrow and everything. Just out of curiosity, because I was just finding some of these stories in the BBC as we were starting the show and everything. Are they covering the apparently Kenyan LGBT activist that was murdered, and apparently housemate was convicted of the horrific murder and everything.
Yeah.
So the body of Edwin Chilipo was found dumped in a box last year, sparking global condemnation. And in another story, which is in a small part of the world, so I doubt it's getting a lot of play, but it is a thing that is important to the world because a lot of people pay attention. And I forget how it works in the food chain. Maybe Rick can explain it because he's a Mensa member and everything. But the Iceland has issued permits allowing whale hunting until 2029. So this allows for animal catches of 209 fin whales and 217 Mike whales and everything. And this just came down that Ireland apparently is going to allow people to fish for whales, even though in some cases aren't whales an endangered species and everything along those lines. But I guess Iceland's like, we need the money, so we're going to allow y'all to hunt these whales and everything like that.
Yeah, I got that story. The big story they have in Spain, and they're still crying about it today, is Valencia, which is one of the biggest cities in Spain, got this flood that killed 120,000 cars. I mean, it's amazing. And about 200 to 300 people, maybe 500 people. They're not really sure. And they can't get enough of the flood. So every day they cover the flood in Valencia. And Valencia is the outer lying parts of the city are destroyed basically, but the city itself is okay. But it's a big problem. It was the flooding here and the weather here. Now, when it comes to Ukraine, like I said, they don't cover that at all. They do cover France and what's happening with Macron over in France and the potential shift of the government over there. And that seems to be a pretty big story. And there's also petite corruption here in Spain, where they find these politicians that have their hands.
Are you taking this information from local papers?
No, it actually comes from TV. There's a TV called The Ultimate Hour. It's a 24-hour news channel here in Spain.
Because I'm reading a lot of English papers, US, UK, sometimes even Canadian. Believe it or not.
No, this is all in Spanish. All the TV shows I listen to here are in Spanish.
Yeah, because in all the English media, the Ukraine war is normally, if not on the first page, then on second or third. Yeah, it's
this is a 24-hour TV channel. They don't.
No, listen. I'm not going to suggest to Spanish television what to show and what's not.
We're on the Iberian Peninsula, so we're pretty far away from.
You're far away. Yes, that's correct. Romania is not as far away.
Romania is right next door.
The neighbor of Romania is actually Moldova. And Moldova used to be part of Romania, but thanks to pact between Stalin and Hitler, Stalin got the part of Romania, which is today called Moldova, with the Chisinau as the capital. And so this is something used to be part of the Soviet Union. So when Putin will, if it will be allowed, hopefully not, but he will take Ukraine, he will take Moldova easily because it's very small agrarian republic with no army. They will take them easily. So now Romania will be right on the border with
Russia. Yeah, I mean
the Soviet Union too. It will be
a
problem. And guess from Romania who is next? It's on the north, it's Hungary. On the south is Bulgaria, and then it goes all the way to Greek peninsula.
Those are NATO countries.
It doesn't matter what NATO can do against Russia. Not that Russia is so much stronger than NATO, not at all. But Russia has balls. It has guts. It proves that if they believe into something, they believe that Ukraine is part of Russia. Well, you can argue for the next 5.5 days that it's not. It doesn't matter. They believe that it's part of Russia and should be returned to Russia. And they don't spare the lives of hundreds of thousands of people, including their own, to prove their point. And NATO is not there until Putin will hit one of the major countries, not even Baltic states, which are NATO. They will hit Germany France, or UK. Then it will be something different. And I think that NATO will try to resolve this conflict and saying it's misunderstanding. We didn't want to fight with you. It's happened by accident. What you want to do about it? Okay, so we will pay you some money for your troubles or so on. We are not going to support Ukraine. We are not going to support anybody. You are right, Mr. Putin. Thank you. Donald, say something. Don't say, yeah, you're right.
So Sasha, I'm looking at a map here. And
Yeah.
you're talking about European countries, but Russia butts up against a bunch of Asian countries. Does Russia want Asian countries like Georgia or
Yes,
Azerbaijan
that's
or
what it is.
Kazakhstan, or is he not interested?
Georgia
These Asian countries, they are playing a Finland game that Finland played all the way from 1945 until the fall of Soviet Union in 1991. So what they are doing is they are always bow to Putin. They're saying, you're right. Yes, we support you. They hate him as much as just almost any normal person in the world. But they don't want to have a confrontation with Putin. Therefore, they're just patiently waiting until he'll pass away. And that will happen sooner or later, and they'll just keep waiting. That's all what they're doing. So Russia doesn't want to spare any efforts, try to fight all those countries. What for? Putin has them anyway. Now Putin has a lot of new problems in Syria. Apparently, he entered Syria when Obama was the president, and he warned him that we are moving to Syria. Barack Obama says, yes, you're welcome. So they came there. And now there are several fractions that they're fighting. The government forces of Bashar Assad, and they're fighting, of course, among themselves. And Turkey is supporting the opposition forces who are fighting Russia. So now Turkey and Russia will have frictions. And this is uncharted territory. It's very difficult to see what's going to happen in Syria, but we'll see in the next few weeks which way it will go.
Yeah, we'll see which way it goes and everything. Hey, I had a question for you.
About the dead CEO, the murdered CEO.
Yeah, before we get to that, I did have a quick question for Sasha, and then we'll get to the murdered CEO and everything along those lines, because I guess that has some political ramifications as well, since it is world politics. But Australia, apparently sometime back, I think it was before Thanksgiving, had this notion of a cap that they would allow the number of foreign students that they accepted, and apparently that created anxiety both at their home of those students as well as abroad and everything. So I'm just wondering, under the new leadership of Trump, will we be seeing a similar bill here in the United States where we're going to put a cap on the amount of foreign students that can come to the U.S.? Because we know whether it's at Duke, which I'm around the corner from, or UNC, or even up north at NYU, and even out west where Rick is, a number of students from around the world come to these United States institutions, whether they be small colleges or major colleges. So are we going to put a cap on the students?
I just clicked on an article, so I'll tell you what the article says when I'm done looking at it.
Okay. What's your take on that, Rick? I mean, Nick, are you thinking that we need to put a cap on the students? Oh, Shaquille, maybe you're here, Nick, down south and everything. But do you think that there needs to be a cap on international students worldwide? Because Australia apparently did that, and I saw that article from a couple of, like, it was before Thanksgiving, so it was the middle of November. So I guess y'all were putting a cap on the amount of students that could come from outside of Australia.
Australia looked at introducing a cap because of a number of factors. One was that students were enrolling in fictitious or corrupted educational institutions, and then they were working instead of studying, as well as those students who go to proper universities were taking up so many spaces that the domestic students didn't have access to places. So that's why there was a cap, so that domestic students would be able to come in. I suspect that if students in the United States are taking advantage of the program, then some sort of cap would be looked at, because as I've said on many other shows, immigration is an issue that's affecting most Western countries at the moment, and most countries are trying to deal with it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
This
sense.
article says that students from like Muslim countries, because when Trump became president in 2017, he restricted entry of citizens from 7 Muslim majority nations into the U.S. for 90 days. So students from Muslim countries are being advised, don't go home, be here, already be in the country when he takes over, so you don't have problems re-entering the U.S. Trump also restricted Chinese nationals, and there are there are nearly 300,000 foreign exchange students from China in the U.S. There are 1/3 Indian students. India is the #1 country for having students in the U.S.
Yeah, I don't know why they're picking on the poor students coming in. I'll tell you what happened in Spain is they are eliminating the golden visa, where you invest $500,000 and they grant you a visa. But here's the reason they're getting rid of it: too many Chinese. In other words, they dwarf the amount of people that are receiving the golden visa here are people from China coming into Spain. It's kind of amazing. Another interesting factoid about Spain is that if you go into a lot of these stores, they're run by Chinese and they're run by Indians. They run all the stores that are open 24 hours. These people work really hard. The ones that take siestas are all Spanish. So I know when I go into a Spanish store, because they're going to be closed from like noon till 4 o'clock, or sometimes noon till 8. I mean, seriously. And then they open up at 8 and they close at midnight. And it's a traditional Spanish restaurant or Spanish store. The Indian and Chinese, they're open like from 8 o'clock to like 9 o'clock. They're open like 12 hours a day. So it's kind of interesting here. But they did eliminate the golden visa. Starting next year, you can't get in here. I got my visa, so I don't really care anymore.
You got your visa. You're good to go and everything.
Too many people coming in here. It's kind of crazy.
But speaking of people coming in stuff and everything, I got a question, because I actually heard about this story, and it's a somewhat lighthearted story, but not that lighthearted, because it's a serious issue and everything. So those of you that travel around the world and everything, why do some of these folks that are, I guess, maybe young and stupid, do like crazy things, like try to smuggle out animals like strapped to their body? Because apparently last month there was a gentleman that tried to smuggle out tarantulas. Why you're going to try to strap tarantulas to your body is beyond me, because aren't some tarantulas poisonous, as I remember correctly? I know they're also an endangered species, but he was literally had those transported, and I think he also had centipedes and ants sent from Peru to South Korea also on the body and everything. So I don't even know what you can get for that kind of situation. Rick, you'll love this, because in a similar situation, they're saying that life for women among the Amazon's illegal gold miners is harsh, violent, and can be deadly, because some of them are selling sex for gold in the Amazon's illegal mines. So I guess they're trying to use their body in order to get some of this precious gold and all along those lines. But definitely there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on in the world. I don't know if y'all got comments on that.
When people smuggle animals, we only hear about the people who get caught. There are probably, people who are really good at like strapping little birds to themselves, and they probably
there's a whole market in that. There's a whole market, but also, Mark, just think of it this way: there's 8 billion people in the world, or something like that. So let's say Rick Rosner gets a 1 out of a million in an IQ test. So he's one of 300 people that score really well on IQ tests. But then he goes to China. Well, there's 1,300 of him. Okay, and then go to India. There's like 1,400 of them.
Yeah, that's why I freaked out and didn't go to Harvard, because I'm like, I may have been the smartest kid at my high school, but I couldn't even get laid in high school. And I'm like, wait a second, if I can't get laid in high school, then I'm going to go to Harvard, where I'm going to be entirely average, and I won't get laid there either, and I'll be really sad, and I'll flunk out, and I'll waste my parents' money.
Hey, hold on a second. I got the point y'all making, but hold on 1 second, because Nick, there's a country that you tease rightfully, because it's a very leftist country, from what I understand, and everything along those lines. And you tease them mercilessly. You've been teasing them mercilessly for a while. But apparently the UN recently, I think it was just yesterday, has ordered Venezuela not to destroy the election vote tallies because the opposition is saying that the tallies prove that their candidate, and not the one that claimed that they won, Nicolas Maduro, won the election. So if the UN forces this issue, maybe we're going to have new leadership in Venezuela, because apparently there was a lot of voter fraud. We complain about voter fraud here in the United States, but apparently there was massive voter fraud there in Venezuela, and the UN wants us to investigate this and all along those lines.
There was, but like, what's anybody going to be able to do? The UN is toothless, and does Maduro does anybody have the forces to overturn the fraudulent election?
Who holds the army will win that game? Who holds the military? But the real problem I'm having with Venezuela is they really screwed up their country. I mean, they shot themselves in the foot. They have the world's largest oil reserves, more than Saudi Arabia. You can fact check that, Rick. I'm just pulling things off Internet AI. Okay, so here you got a country that has the world's largest oil reserves. And at one time, they were the richest individuals. I even had friends in Caracas, Venezuela, because they'd come up and they'd buy all these properties in Florida, and they were just bloody rich because of their oil. And they screwed it up. And here's how they screwed it up. Shaquille will love this, because these people are all, the communists or the socialists got in, the Democratic Party. Oh, we're gonna level the playing field, so we're gonna take over all the oil fields. There was only one problem. They had no clue how to operate an oil company. They had no clue how to operate the oil fields. And so what happens, the whole oil industry collapsed, because if you think about it, hey, I'm going to take over an oil field. Okay, great. What do you do next? Well, I don't know anything about it. I just want the money. Good for you.
So yeah, Venezuela has the GDP per capita. Venezuela is $4,000. So yeah, their economy is a freaking wreck. That's half the average GDP of the rest of Latin America.
Yeah, but really quick. Go ahead and look at their GDP 20 years ago, Rick.
Yeah, they had a better GDP than that time. But just really quickly, and this is for both Sasha and Shaquille, because I know that they're in the investment space and we've talked about it before. What is the thoughts around gold? Because apparently even in Ghana, which is an African nation, they're saying that illegal Ghana gold mining caused widespread disruption, and it's picked up this year, following an almost 30% rise in global gold prices, despite military operations to shut them down and everything. So apparently there's a lot of gold around the world that I guess isn't being tapped into. So maybe some folks would want to get out there and try to do the old fashioned, like we did here in the United States back in the Wild West days of gold mining in some of these places, whether it's Venezuela or whether it's Ghana or and everything. So how much gold reserve is there in the world and everything?
Well, hold on. The gold is a terrible investment. There's so much scammy stuff going on with gold. And gold, you buy 5 pounds of gold for a ton of money, and 10 years later you still have 5 pounds of gold. There's no growth there. It's subject to, like, you see ads on Fox News trying to scare old people into the world's ending, so you better own gold. And then gold mining is filled with fraud. It's a terrible, gold itself is great to have, but not as an investment, because it makes nice jewelry. It makes, it's good in electronics, but investing in gold, I don't know, unless better investors than I know.
And pretentious people from Australia buy it, but other than that, people don't buy it. So, oh wait, show us your gold chain again.
No, this is my small one. I've got a platinum chain with diamonds in it. I very rarely wear it.
You fit well in the Miami marketplace, because in South Florida, they love to wear gold. In India, they love to wear gold. So there's a demand for the product, and it is metal that's used in other places. But other than that, it doesn't use anything, And
so gold certainly has,
what?
So gold certainly has some safe haven status to it, and it does have some industrial uses, although people generally buy it as a store of value. When you say that it's not a good investment, if you listen to someone like Warren Buffett, who says, hey, if I could buy all the agricultural land in the United States and Canada, or I could buy all the gold in the world, which is worth about the same, I think I'd prefer to have all of the agricultural land. Now, I personally would agree with him that having all that land would be better. but it's worth noting that gold is a good hedge against instability of currencies. And if you look at the price of gold and oil in gold and oil terms, they pretty much are worth about the same throughout history, and they maintain their value. If you have a look at inflation and then compare that to the overall market, you'll also see that gold tends to hold its value over time. Now, obviously, it's more volatile, but does tend to hold its value. I do want to finish what I was trying to talk about a couple of days ago, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
You made a comment, Rick, about not just yelling at Biden, but yelling at corporations such as the potato cartel when it comes to inflation. Is that an acceptable paraphrase of what you said?
It wasn't just government overspending, but it was a lot of people were drafting. We're saying, hey, everybody's pissed at the government for inflation. Let's use that as a way to sneak in some shrinkflation of our own.
Right. Now, you also made reference when you made that comment to you being a liberal. And you know that in previous shows I've said, well, I'm a liberal, which is the reason why I've gravitated towards the Republicans and centre-right political parties, because I don't consider the centre-left political parties in the world to be acting anything like what liberals were supposed to be. Now, let's talk about this potato cartel. One of the things that I complain about with many industries is that it's very hard to create a monopoly, and it's even harder to maintain a monopoly in general. Generally, competition comes into that marketplace and competes, and so you have many players vying for the same opportunities. However, because of regulations and preferential government treatments, we have seen monopoly-type arrangements where industries are controlled by just a handful of organizations. Banking, you've got your top 4 or 5 banks. Insurance companies, you've got your top 4 or 5 insurance companies. Healthcare, you got your top 4 or 5 companies. I can go on and on and on. Groceries, you've got your top 4 or 5 grocery stores, if you're lucky enough to live in the United States. In Australia, you've got your top 2 that control 60, 70% of the market. So what we're seeing is an over-concentration of corporate power. If you want to do something about cartel-like behavior, whether it be with potatoes or anything else, perhaps it would be wise for government to create the conditions for competition to exist. There is no reason for there to only be 4 companies that are controlling the potato market in a country of 350 million people. A country the size of the United States has 4 companies controlling potatoes. How does that make sense to anybody? So, when you guys had...
You have 4 companies, you have 4 companies controlling meat in the U.S.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing is that these poor farmers, and this is where I think if Democrats wanted to do something to increase and improve their results in rural America, what they should be doing is going and talking to these individual families that own farms who are being squeezed, who are earning hardly anything and working their asses off because they're under these really brutally unfair contracts with the top 4 or 5 meat and agriculture companies in the United States. Right? They should do something about the John Deeres of the world that force farmers not to be able to repair their own equipment after they've bought it and things like that, which is, costing collectively billions of dollars. Those sorts of things, introducing competition would be something, I would argue, that would be really positive. And, you talk, and there's real world consequences as well. You talk about things like the milk powder or the baby powder shortage that you guys had. I think it was last year or the year before. You've got one company that has that contract. One company. Now, if the government is prepared to pay or subsidize this product for nursing mothers, why don't they allow all milk companies to be able to compete? If you can produce the milk at a certain price, at a certain quality, the consumer can choose to buy your milk or the other company's milk or whatever. But instead, you've got one company. So when there is a problem with that one factory, it knocks out the entire country's milk supply to the point that you've then got to go and try and buy milk from Australia, right? Which I would argue, hey, our agricultural products are the best in the world. So, hey, I'm happy with you buying our milk. But what I'm saying is that this is the cause of the problem. And in my view, centre-left political parties have abandoned the working class in order to help promote these big corporations. And in this last election, Kamala Harris and the Democrats were actually talking about what a positive thing it was that the CEOs of all the big companies were on their side. And I think that was very off-putting to a lot of people who, like me, say, look, we need to have some big corporations, absolutely. And of course, I trade the market, so I want to see big corporations flourish, but not at the expense of small businesses and taking away the opportunities of people who would like to start a business of their own.
I think it's called what? Regulatory capture, where the biggest players buy the legislators because it takes a ton of money to run for office. And then the legislators are beholden to the huge companies.
Right, but if you're a liberal, if you're a liberal, the key parts of liberalism is, and forget about classical liberalism, the key parts of just liberalism in general is a mistrust of government and a mistrust of big corporations. Isn't it? Or again, is American liberalism?
Well, I think both sides. I mean, we just killed the CEO of United Healthcare, which is a very bad health coverage company. They are under investigation for monopoly, which we were just talking about, for insider trading and for fraud. And they turn down 32% of the medical claims that come through them. Oh, you have this procedure, you want to get this chemotherapy? Well, there's a 1/3 chance we're going to say no.
I think that's a different debate. I know you want to talk about that, so let's just leave that for a minute. I'll just come back to this.
But my understanding is that a lot of this going easy on monopolies was kind of started under Reagan, where the view was that monopolies can be good because the cream rises to the top, and there must be a reason that they are the biggest company. And that under Biden, according to what I've read, this was they appointed with the FTC, Lena What's-Her-Face, one of the first person in several presidential administrations to actually go after trusts and monopolies.
Yeah, fine. But as I said, most monopolies will break under their own weight because of enhanced competition, right? If you've got a really good idea, somebody else will take that idea and do the same thing. So if you have a look at the monopoly that Standard Oil had, right? Eventually, like they didn't just rape and pillage America because there was one competition that was trying to enter the market. Now, yes, the government stepped in and tried to break them up, but they broke them up into what, 4 or 5 companies. What I'm saying is that criticism of big corporations and the government, isn't that a liberal position? I just don't understand what American liberals are doing when they're saying, well, you know, we don't like this sort of stuff. We want to champion individual freedom, and so to do that, we're going to support the biggest corporations. Government. I don't get it.
But Shaquille, I guess what I'm asking is, I have not, and I live in an area that's got a lot of these kind of monopolies that you're talking about, and a lot of the liberal activists that I know are very critical of the monopolies and the corporations, just the way that you want them to be. I know some folks that have been very critical of the pharmacy, big pharma, have been very critical of some of the monopolies in the energy field, and these are people that are quote unquote progressive. So what you want them to do is actually what I've been hearing them do, and maybe you're not hearing that in Australia, but I've been hearing a lot of them that have been very critical of these corporations, even in our own field of the media, because even in the media, if you want to get tickets, you pretty much got to go through Ticketmaster, or there might be one or two others.
But this is my point, Mark. But this is my point. How are you critical of that stuff and then go and vote for the same political party? It'd be like Sasha, right? If Sasha says, "Look, I really love Canada. I've lived my whole life in Canada since I left the Soviet Union, or the former Soviet Union now, and what I want is not to have a dickhead in charge of Canada," right? If Sasha then says to me, "Well, why would you?" Like, if Sasha then says to me he votes for Trudeau, I would say, "Sasha, I thought you said you didn't want to have a dickhead in charge," right? So I'm being silly, but why would you vote for the Democrats? I don't get it.
Why would you Why would you vote for the Republicans? Trump has appointed at least 10 billionaires to his cabinet. And then Trump got 6 times as much money as a proportion of his overall contributions from billionaires as Harris did. And Trump loves billionaires.
Yeah,
I
because
don't.
they're successful. That's the reason he likes them. I mean, so just because
but a lot of them are self-made. If you're talking about people like Vivek Ramaswamy, they're self-made billionaires, right? Vivek Ramaswamy didn't. I don't think he's a billionaire. I think he's a centimillionaire. But he's not running some big conglomerate company. It's not running like a big bank or a big pharmaceutical company or a big whatever, right? Like you look at the criticism that was being leveled at Hillary Clinton in 2016, where she was getting paid, reportedly, I'm going from memory now, things like $750,000 to do a speech. Now, unless she's as good at speaking as I am, nobody except for me is worth $750,000 for a speech, surely.
But that's both parties. That's both parties.
Let's do Kelly Loeffler, who just got appointed to his cabinet, who became a billionaire because she gave blowjobs to the head of the New York Stock Exchange, and he married her.
Yeah, and so what's your point, Counselor?
I mean, she's not self-made except through
what you're saying is you become a billionaire, no matter how you become a billionaire. You're now a bad person. You're going to do bad.
You're not a bad person, but Shaq is saying that the Democrats are the party of big business, and I'm saying nobody likes big business, and really the Republicans are at least as entwined with big business as the Dems.
Why big business? Big businesses are scaled to be profitable. I mean, they're big for a reason.
But I'm just saying that the Republicans are just as guilty as letting monopolists off the hook as Dems.
What gets me is you meet a certain metric, you're a big business. You meet a certain metric, you're a billionaire, and hence you're bad. And that's just absolutely not true.
No, but saying that the Democrats are letting all this monopolist shit
look, I'll certainly say this to you, Rick. I think that in this last election, I think that the majority of people formed that opinion. I can say to you that when you look at the Labor Party here in Australia and the Labor Party in the UK, the Labor by definition is supposed to be, a party that's mostly represented by unions or representative of unions. And I can say that there is a feeling amongst many people that the unions are not as necessary as what they used to be. Still necessary, they still do great work, but they're not as important as they used to be. And that what Labor is doing is it is making deals with big corporations to allow them to operate in a way that shuts out competition from smaller competitors. And we've seen that across, I can just keep going on and on about all the different industries that have been affected by these regulations. Now, I grant you that it is a bipartisan issue. I grant you that centre-right political parties have been guilty of this as well. But I think that small business owners and people that want to run their own show and just be left alone by government are gravitating towards centre-right political parties. And I would say to Liberals that if they are wondering why these people are gravitating towards the right, it is because of this feeling that the left has just gotten into bed with the big corporations.
Let me
finish my sentence. And I think that centre-left political parties need to do a lot of work in order to be able to win back that block.
So let me agree with you. Certainly the Dems have been out-messaged. They generally are. And the Biden was super pro-union, and he built a lot of Harris and Biden built a lot of their campaigns off of that. Biden was the first president in history, I think, to walk a picket line, and he still couldn't get the endorsement of some unions. And so I agree that I think there is, even though the Dems go crazy kissing unions' asses, I think that no longer persuades a big chunk of voters that they're for the people. So I think you're right in that.
But when you say that Dems are out-messaged, how are they out-messaged? The majority of mainstream media are made up of people that Dems, right, or centre-left people in other countries.
Yeah,
The
but
majority of media, the majority of
I'll do that.
entertainment, the majority of celebrities, like everybody who's out there, all of the media coverage that's out there is on the side of centre-left political parties, or the Dems in the case of America. How are they out-messaged? And if they're out-messaged, when did they start becoming out-messaged? Because they've been in power for 16 of the last 20 years. So they only just started becoming out-messaged now? Is that the claim?
Okay, so yeah, most reporters, most journalists lean left. Most owners of big media companies lean right. And then you need to set aside all the established media companies, because what's been argued, given the results of this last election, is that people aren't buying what big media is selling anymore, and it's the little niche. It's social media. It's little operators like Newsmax and like that have more persuasive.
Okay, but back to my question, right? Yes, people have stopped buying it because people have complained for such a long time that the media coverage is too biased, that media coverage is not accurate, that media coverage tends to lecture people, etc. People complained about that. Big media did nothing about it. But it still remains the fact that big media has been on the side for decades, has been on the side of the Dems and centre-left political parties around the world.
But if people wait, but
so where's the out-messaging coming from?
So, but if people are unpersuaded by all of that, then my point stands that people aren't buying it, and tens of millions of Americans are buying the messaging that doesn't come from big media. It comes from little conservative operators.
Okay, so if that's the case, and you're saying that Dems are being out-messaged right now, not in the past, but right now they're being out-messaged.
I don't know, but I mean, like, more people, but people who like follow Tucker Carlson believe in his message more strongly than people who, follow Morning Joe.
I don't think that's difficult to do. All right, now I'll let you guys. I think we've discussed that topic enough. Did you want to help?
Let's let that lead into another topic, which is you've got Elon Musk, the world's richest guy, and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's worth I don't know how many billions of bucks. They are going to be the ones who are saying, like today they came out and said, we're going to look at getting rid of all these programs, these federal programs that were never the product of legislation, that there's no legislative basis for it, for things like certain veterans benefits and, like, let's say Head Start, and I'll use it because I looked up the statistics. Head Start serves about 1 billion preschool kids a year, a little less than 1/4 of all preschoolers. It costs $12 billion a year, which is roughly $10,000 to $12,000 per kid. And that's a thing that they're going to look at getting rid of because there's no legislative basis for it existing.
Yeah, well, you know my thoughts and feelings on this anyway, is that the parents should be able to either be given the money directly, or if you don't want them to just be given the money because they'll spend it on something else, give them some sort of voucher and let private enterprise compete in this space in elementary school, middle school and high school, right? You should allow that to happen because the worst case scenario is that private enterprise comes in, does a bad job of it, and people flood back to the public system. The best case scenario is that there is real competition to the public system. And I think that there is a lot of unhappiness that people have in the education system and the misalignment of priorities between what educators think are in the best interest of children and what parents think. And parents should ultimately be the ones that make these decisions.
So, I mean, I have varying thoughts on that. But one thought is that when I grew up, people were happy. People didn't pay less attention to kids. Parenting wasn't even a word yet. And we all went to public school and everybody was cool with it. But times have changed. And
Yeah, but Rick, that's like my great grandparents, or even my grandparents saying, "Oh, when I was in school, we had one room and there was 30 of us, and we all were in different years. We had one teacher, and we got through school okay." I mean, I'm not really sure what the argument is there. Obviously, times have changed, things have changed, and I think that today people are able to prioritize other things in their lives. Now, look, I don't know. I've never had this conversation with either Sasha or Nick, but they are both great chess players. Okay, I assume that they would have tried to introduce chess to their children, and hope that their children would have taken up the passion for the game. Now, oftentimes, if my uncle is anybody to go by, my uncle's kids weren't really that interested in chess. Right? They've got this great chess master as a parent, but they just weren't interested. Okay, I don't think my uncle would have forced them into a chess school because they didn't show that interest. Me, on the other hand, instead of putting me into art because I'm crap at it, right? Performing art's a little bit different, but drawing pictures, I can't even draw a stick figure convincingly. Okay, instead of putting me into art school or art classes, I should have been put into chess classes because I would have benefited from that much more and I would have enjoyed it much more, right? The school system doesn't really allow for that. But why couldn't the money that would have been spent on me going to art class, why couldn't my parents have said, okay, government, you're going to spend, I'm just making it up, you're going to spend $50 a week on art classes for my son. He's not interested in that. We'll get a chess tutor to come in, and he can sit in another room and play chess or learn chess, right? And then you find out that 10 other kids are actually more interested in chess. That's what I'm talking about. Individual education with parents in control rather than a cookie cutter approach, which is leaving our kids behind. And the bottom line is that we now have kids that are graduating high school overall with worse results. It's not just in the US, it's across the Western world, but the US is more pronounced than what we are perhaps here in Australia. That with worse results than their parents had, their grandparents, and in some cases their great-grandparents. And these are generations that lived through World War I, World War II, Vietnam, etc. This is a terrible situation. And I don't think that more government regulation is the solution.
I agree with most of what you're saying, that there's an opportunity with modern technology to tailor education, to address what kids need, where kids' interests are, and that education in general is doing a crap job of addressing that. That's on the
right. And now Randy Weingarten won't have a bar for
let me yeah, we should figure out how to do that. At the same time, there's a big segment of politicians who kind of want to scuttle public education for reasons not directly relating to educational excellence.
No,
they're wanting to scuttle it because they're concerned about the misalignment of priorities, where schools are saying we really need to teach children about gender ideology, okay, and transsexualism and all this sort of stuff, instead of maths, English, and science. And then when they try to bring it up, they get accused of all sorts of things by school boards. And again, I believe that freedom should lie with the parents, not more government as being the solution. And Randy Weingarten is out there.
All right, constantly
that's great. You may not, but she's out there. She's constantly resistant to parents having more say, right? And who does she align herself with? I'll give you a hint. It's not the Republicans. So are the Dems going to stand up to her? Or are the Dems just going to go, well, she's on our side, we'll just take her because it's a good voting bloc?
That's true, but the Republicans have another agenda. Not every Republican, but the same push of far right people to take over state legislatures the push that happened in 2010 is very similar to the push to take over school boards by far right people over the past 5 to 8 years.
Define what you mean by far right. That I don't want my 12-year-old girl to have to get changed in and out of her bathers with a biological boy in her change room. Is that what we're talking about as being a far right position?
Kind of. What we're talking about is people who.
What do you mean kind of? Because I don't consider that to be far right. That's normal.
Let me say some more. So it's people who grab onto that stuff and grab onto, there's a book called Genderqueer that's, I guess it's a graphic novel that for teens basically, that shows like a guy, a teen blowing another teen, and they don't want that in libraries, and they use stuff like that to push through a whole program.
Okay, but you're referring to those parents as being far right parents. May I just suggest that it wouldn't have gotten to this point if parents had been listened to when they came across these books in the first place, and parents said, "Look, actually, I think that's a bit much. I think that shouldn't be available in the school library. I think that's something that, you know, if I as a parent feel that my child is ready for, that I will introduce to my child, right?" And the school went, no, we know better. You be quiet.
All right. Right? So I kind of agree with you. The Democrats should have played defense. Like when you look at abortion, for instance, the Republicans, one of the huge Republicans' talking points about Dems and abortion is you guys allow abortion right up to the point of birth and sometimes after. So the Democrats never played defense. They never either legislate. Now it's right in Roe that you can't just do that. You can't get an abortion willy-nilly in the third trimester. But the Democrats never pushed that point, and they never legislated about it. The Democrats should have covered their asses by saying, no, we have rules that you can't just get an abortion for whatever frickin' reason in month 8 or 9 or whatever. Similarly, I agree with you. The Dems should have said, yeah, no blowjob books in any high school library. And some people, some lefties might have said, well, that's not First Amendment freedom. And Democrats are like, shut up, we are playing defense. And with first of all,
it's not about First Amendment, because you don't allow Playboy or Penthouse magazines. I don't even know if they still exist, but when I was in high school, they did. You don't allow them to be available in the school library, right? I mean, if you wanted to try and perv on women, you'd go to the biology section and see if you could find some raunchy picture in there. Or it wasn't even raunchy; it was a medical picture. But look, in relation to abortion, it's not so much about Dems playing defense. It is that what they did instead was they doubled down on this, and it became an argument of, yeah, well, absolutely, women should be able to give birth. They should be on the operating table with their legs apart, halfway through giving birth, and said, "That's it, kill it."
Yeah, that's bad.
And Dem just went with it.
That's bad strategy. Similar.
But what strategy is that? I mean, how can anybody think that wasn't going to piss off the majority of people?
So, and it's not even true, but like they didn't even publicize that Roe has, I didn't learn that till a few months ago, that Roe actually has language restricting third trimester abortions. Nobody told me that. That should be a huge point, that it's built right in there. And it's similar. And so, yeah, sorry if you want to look at the blowjob comic book, then you have to go to a special, you either have to go downtown to the library or you have to go to a special section where it's just not on the shelf. It's just playing defense. Similar with some trans issues. Like, cover your ass politically.
Well, I mean, look, if you go up around truckers and mechanics and stuff like that, you go into their workshop and you go into the bathrooms, there's normally some cut out girly pictures on the back of the toilet, doors, right? But I don't see mechanics and truckers and blokes like that saying, well, we want it to be mandatory that there are pictures like this on the back of every cubicle at every school in Australia or America or whatever, right? That's the difference. The difference is that there's one thing where parents might turn a blind eye to their kid looking at something funny or something sexual, right? And the school actively promoting it, which I don't think is their role, but it comes back to this idea of liberalism. Liberalism means that you want to be in charge of what happens with your own family, not the government and not big corporations telling you what's best for you, and then not being able to do anything about it because you're forced to comply with regulations, rules, and laws.
Yeah, okay.
No?
So I just want to say one last thing: wanting more parental control, which is also students' control. It's not just parents; it's the kid, him or herself, making some decisions about what they are interested in. But don't let that be a Trojan horse for letting all these other agendas in. Because
Well, that's what the Dems have done, isn't it? The Dems have let these issues become a Trojan horse, so allowing things that the majority of society don't support.
yeah, so don't do that, either side.
Okay, well now you're getting the reaction, which is the Republicans are going to come out there, and Republicans may be a little bit crazy, right? The center-right parties might go a little bit too far, and then the pendulum will swing back and forth. But I mean, this is just what happens as a result of Dems pushing things to the point they have over the protests. Our parents were actively out there telling them, stop, and they kept going with it.
It's also the result of Republicans thinking more strategically. Like whenever you hear about a think tank,
how are the Republicans thinking strategically when they've been out of power for 16 of the last 20 years? Where's the strategy that Republicans have got?
Didn't you really have the freaking power though? Like so. But when you hear about a think tank, it's always a conservative think tank. Where are the liberal think tanks teaching Dems how to not get outplayed by, you know, like most of what Trump is putting in, like people are not so in favor of, but here we are going to get it. And it's part of it is a result of Dems being bad strategists or thinking they don't need strategy at all, that they're good, that our inherent goodness is going to convince voters to vote for us. No, it fucking doesn't.
Sasha and Nick, do you have any comments before we wind up the show?
Well, we're actually at the
I still believe that the election, the recent election, was decided on two issues: economy and the border. And that's where the Democrats were defenseless. They could win many, many other but less important issues, but it wouldn't change the outcome of the election. So they dig themselves into a big hole, and also disarray of the leadership of Democrats. So Biden, after the debates with Trump, he should have immediately, not just say that he's not going to participate in the upcoming election, he should have resigned as a president.
That's freaking right. That's freaking right.
His health problems, just resign, let Kamala run the show or whatever. She will appoint it, or maybe she would have the primaries or so on. At least it would be all her show. And she didn't have to defend. Actually, she was defensive when she asked many times, would your policy would be different from Biden's? How much different? What could she say? She's still technically vice president to the president, Joseph Biden. How could she open her mouth and say, well, my policy will be different? She couldn't do it. So she was restricted in many ways. So if number one, Joe Biden, that's number one reason why Democrats lost elections. Number two, well, you know what? The Joe Biden, he's, how I said, the stubborn Irish prick, and he should have kept it until the end. He should have not resigned from the primaries or from the running for the president. He should have gone all the way, losing terribly to Donald Trump, obviously, but at least he runs the show from beginning to the end. That's the way he is. But he did the devious thing by staying as president and let her come for the election. So he would know, okay, the little girl, she will lose it, and I will go to as a great president who allow my vice president to run. Well, unfortunately, she lost, but I'm still one of the greatest presidents.
Yeah, okay, all right, you make good
He
point.
did the horrible thing. He's a stupid prick. Well, that's what he is.
I think he's going to be remembered in the same way as Carter's remembered, except that people liked Carter once he was no longer the president. I don't think that there's any redemption for Biden, and I don't think there's time for him to redeem himself. I mean, he couldn't even stay awake at the African summit he was just at. So I can't say him being a great advocate for the United States in his post-presidential times.
Yeah, all right. Goodbye, everybody.
Time,
See you
so we're gonna
tomorrow.
have to go, and we'll see everybody next time on World Politics.
See you, everybody.